Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our meeting of the Planning Development Committee for September 9th. All members of committee are present today. Members of committee, there were changes since its publication. Peter, do you want to go, our clerk, if you can just run us through some of the changes since its publication?
Through you, Mr. Chair, members of committee, members of the public in attendance tonight. These are the changes to this evening's agenda that were provided to the clerk's office prior to proceeding tonight. In regard to item 4.1, which is a statutory public meeting item regarding the Queen Street Corridor Land Use Study in Wards 1 and 3, a city-initiated official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, there is additional correspondence 13.3 on tonight's agenda. In regard to item 4.2, statutory public meeting, city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment for pigeon coop setback requirements. There is an amended page 4.2-9 and the correct public notice, which is published on the city's website. In regard to item 4.3 on this evening's agenda, city-initiated official plan amendment to remove shale protection policies from Northwest Brampton, Heritage Heights in Ward 6. There is a delegation 5.2 in regard to this item. And delegation 5.2 is from Scott Snyder. In addition, we have added delegations 5.3 in regards to item 7.8 on this evening's agenda, the Queen Street West Tertiary Plan in Wards 4, Neil Davis, Daniel Artonasi, Mary Flynn Guglietti, and Ryan Getter. My apologies. We have added delegation 5.4 on this evening's agenda from Neil Davis in regards to item 7.9, an application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw to permit motor vehicle sales, leasing, and rental, establishment, accessory motor vehicle repair, body shop, outside storage, and drive-through facilities. And this is at Inspire Boulevard, east of Dixie, north of Inspire Boulevard. And then we have added delegation 5.5 on this evening's agenda, a delegation from Kirk Franklin, Weston Consulting, and this is in regard to item 7.5 on this evening's agenda, a request for exemption from section 2.1.1 of the Planning Act to facilitate making an application to amend the Snell Grove Heart Lake Secondary Plan, Area 1 for Hopewell Developments in Ward 2. And Mr. Chair, just to point out, 7.5 was published with the agenda on consent, so if to hear this delegation, that item should be removed from consent 7.5 when we deal with the consent motion. As well, we have item 7.8, which is a report from staff regarding the Queen Street West Tertiary Plan in Ward 4. That report was published online on August 30th, and there was an amended page 7.8-2 to correct an appendix reference. And finally, on item 7.9 on this evening's agenda, for which there is a delegation from Neil Davis, there is an updated Appendix 10 to correct the results of the public meeting, and that was published on the city's website on September 6th. And I believe, Mr. Chair, those are the updates that the clerk's office is aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any additions or changes or deletions to the agenda? I see Councillor Fortini.
Thank you, through the chair. I'd just like to add a discussion on for 23 Hillside, and I also have, I think, 4 delegations, and I also wanted to know if we can move it before delegation, since we have a lot of residents here, and we can discuss this before everything else.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the request is to add delegation item 5.6, 4 delegations regarding 23 Hillside, and a discussion item as well, Councillor Fortini, regarding this matter.
Sorry?
Delegations and a discussion item regarding this matter?
Yes, it's going to be a discussion for me, and then I'm going to ask the delegations, I'm going to do a presentation and ask questions. But I'd like also to know if I can move it up ahead, since there's a lot of people from Hillside here.
So, Mr. Chair, it would be identified as a discussion item 9.1, 23 Hillside, from Councillor Fortini, under new business, and it relates to proposed delegations 5.6, and there are 4 delegates. And the request, it would be up to committee to decide whether or not they wish to hear those delegations before dealing with the Section 5 delegations. My advice would be that Council should still proceed with the statutory public notice items, the Section 4 items, before proceeding with the delegation.
I'm fine with that for delegation.
Yeah.
Councillor Palash has requested a show of hands for those who are here regarding the discussion on Hillside. Yeah, so we'll do that right after statutory public meetings. Is that right? As suggested, as you suggested. Okay, great. Okay, Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to request a deferral for item 7.10, a report on the application for the draft plan of subdivision to develop 50 single detached lots and a local public road with a right-of-way of 17 meters for Taneyville Phase 3 Lands, Inc. To facilitate the circulation of the standard public meeting follow-up letter to all area residents that have previously provided delegations or submitted correspondence on this development application, so that this will inform them that the report will be considered at the Planning and Development meeting of October the 7th.
Okay, so a deferral regarding item 7.10. Okay, as there's no further changes, can I get a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting? Moved by Councillor Singh. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? No.
Yes.
Councillor Santos? Yes.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I'd like to, in an abundance of caution, declare a conflict of interest on item 5.1 and related report 7.1 regarding the Kings Point Plaza complex.
Can you state the nature of the conflict?
I, just in an abundance of caution, I live next door to the plaza.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Santos.
Okay.
Okay, so the clerk will also note for the meeting minutes. We now move on to our statutory public meeting reports. Just for a reminder for those in the audience, this is a public meeting of the Planning and Development Committee held in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act of Ontario. The proposals heard at this public meeting are as a result of applications made to the city under the Planning Act. These are not proposals of the City of Brampton unless they are specifically identified as city-initiated proposals. The intent of this public meeting is to hear submissions from the public. Members of the committee may ask for clarification, but will not engage in discussion. Councillor Palashi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to remove 7.5 from consent. We talked about consent earlier on, but we kind of skipped the adding or removing of on the consent agenda.
Okay. So duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other changes before we move forth to the public meeting section? No? Okay. So move a consent motion as amended, moved by Councillor Williams. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Our first item is item 4.1, city-initiated amendments of the official plan and zoning bylaw, Queen Street Corridor Land Use Study, Wards 1 and 3. And we have a presentation by Mr. Bobby Gauthier from WSP. Would anybody like a presentation? Yeah, okay. Yes, please.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming tonight. So today is the statutory public meeting for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment. So, of course, this is not to make a decision on the proposal, but rather to obtain formal public input on what we're putting forward. You can visit the city's website, the meetings and agendas page, to download the information from tonight. And there's also a project website set up. Our study area, I'll start out with this. Our study area consists of lands effectively fronting onto Queen Street, extending from Etobicoke Creek up to Highway 410 in the east. The process to date, I'll just quickly summarize it. So the process was effectively initiated when the city completed an interim control bylaw for our study area. I'll talk about that a little bit later. we've had a couple of public open houses in June of 2018 and June of 2019, and we're here today for the statutory public meeting, of which public notice was issued in August. The intent after tonight is to take all of the comments we've received and, of course, to finalize the documents and bring it forward for Council's consideration to adopt in about November of this year. And then after that, there's an appeal period under the Planning Act. So notice was issued in accordance with the Planning Act for lands within 240 meters of our study area boundary. And just to discuss and present the background and the purpose of the study. So I'll start out by saying the Queen Street corridor is subject to a pretty ambitious vision by the city. The city wants to see it transform into a mixed-use, higher-density corridor. But of course, what you see existing is largely low-density commercial uses. And although the city has this vision in effect in its policy, the zoning is out of step with that. The zoning actually permits low-rise commercial uses. So there's a need for us to update the zoning to bring it into conformity with the official plan. And I think it's also an opportunity for us to consider adding policies into the official plan to help guide the transformation of this corridor. So this is a visualization of what the corridor is intended to achieve in the long term. A very conceptual idea, looking east on the corridor at Kennedy Road. The area is designated in the central area of the official plan, which means it's subject to achieving certain density and intensification expectations under the province's growth plan. It's also subject to the Queen Street Corridor Secondary Plan and the land use designations of that document. Most of the corridor is designated central area mixed use, which plans for a range of different uses, as well as taller buildings and greater densities. And there are some lands, just a few sites, that are designated medium density residential. The zoning, and I'll start out with sort of the westerly half of the corridor. The zoning I would characterize as being mostly highway commercial and service commercial, and that's what's indicated by sort of the pink shade. The yellow indicates low-density residential zoning. Existing zoning in the easterly portion is similar, mostly highway commercial, service commercial, and there are a few sites with industrial zoning in purple. I should note that there have been and there are some ongoing studies by the city in this corridor. It's a very busy corridor. It's subject to a lot of policy. The city recently completed a vision for Queens Boulevard per the Living the Mosaic document. The city is underway to develop a major transit station area policy, as well as the Queen Street Bus Rapid Transit. And there's also an ongoing zoning bylaw review and consideration for a citywide or focused development permit system. I think the main point that I wanted to make by referencing those studies is that it's likely that the policies for the corridor are subject to change in the near to the medium future. So although the city currently has a vision for mixed use in its policy, it's very likely that the specific heights, the densities, and the range of uses could change a little bit in the near future. Some other key considerations that I think are worth noting for context. So there have been some mixed-use developments in this corridor. The corridor is changing. It's not staying the same. It's a gradual transition, but it certainly is evolving. The other thing that we looked at was building permit data. And what we found is that existing businesses continue to operate. There's lower vacancy rates. They're investing in their property. There's a high instance of changes of use. That's the most common building permit that you'll see, is a tenant changing from one use to another, like a retail store to a restaurant. We did find one example of a reconstruction of a quick service restaurant. So I think the main conclusion of these points is that the transition of the corridor is going to be long-term. It's going to take a long time. It is a lot of land when you really think about it, so it will be a gradual transition. Just to summarize some of the overall conclusions that we made in the study, the first option that we considered was this idea of what we call pre-zoning. So we considered the idea of taking the official plan's requirements and putting them directly into the regulatory zoning bylaw. We call that pre-zoning. We opted not to take that approach because, of course, the city is underway with a number of related studies that could actually affect that policy. So we considered that option to be somewhat premature at this point. So I think what we're proposing is, I would describe a transitional framework. Number one, supporting mixed-use development is the priority, but two, giving businesses a degree of flexibility, letting them continue, letting their uses change, because that's been occurring frequently, and also letting commercial uses expand by a small degree. We also want to introduce some policies to guide commercial use reconstruction in a manner that best contributes to the long-term vision of the corridor. So if someone wants to rebuild their plaza, they should do so in a way that best ensures that that long-term vision for the corridor is not going to be precluded. Our proposed zoning bylaw amendment, I'll just flip to the next slide, basically consists of changing most of the zoning in yellow to the QMUT zone, a new Queen Street mixed-use transition zone, and changing a few sites to a future development zone. And I'll explain those zones on this slide. The intent of the Queen Street mixed-use transition zone is to effectively recognize existing uses, allow them to continue, but it's an update to the list of permitted uses to achieve what the official plan says. So there's a range of commercial uses, but they're now in accordance with the official plan. There's also limited ability for commercial uses to expand their floor area by up to 10%. Secondly, the future development zone that we've applied to just a few sites, it's a bit more restrictive in nature because those are uses that are not part of the long-term vision for the corridor. So those are the industrial sites and the single attached residences. That zone rather permits existing uses, but a rezoning is required to permit development. We are proposing an amendment to the secondary plan as well as complementary updates to the design guidelines. Again, I would kind of emphasize the main point of our amendment is the priority is still on encouraging higher density mixed-use development. However, realistically, when we think about the extent of the corridor, the size of it, it's plausible and it's likely that the city is going to receive other kinds of applications. They could receive an application to reconstruct a commercial plaza. We want to make sure the city has the policy in place to be able to address those applications. So we've introduced some new policies that, number one, prioritize the Queen Street frontage for mixed uses, for active uses, and for multi-story buildings. We're ensuring the provision of a long-term road network, and we have some policies to achieve that. That's something that's already part of the secondary plan. We also want the city to review development applications on a case-by-case basis, to think about the long-term phasing of these large sites and work with the developer to implement a strategy that's going to best support the vision for the corridor. So some main conclusions. So the main point is that there is a zoning conformity issue. So the zoning is not in conformity with the policy. Policy has an ambitious vision. The zoning dates back to when development occurred in the 70s and the 80s and so on. The recommended transitional approach, I would characterize as a balanced approach. You know, balanced is one of those words we kind of overuse a bit in the planning world, but I think it does characterize this approach really well. And finally, our recommended zoning and policy framework, I would actually characterize as being an interim solution. So I would expect that as the city advances its major transit station areas study, as well as other studies, that the city is going to want to revisit the zoning and perhaps consider a development permit system in this area. So our next steps is to receive public comments, and we would be looking to revise the documents and bring it forward for council's consideration in November. And additional information is on the city's website, and you can also contact the city planner, Michelle Gervais. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come down and delegate regarding this item? No? Are there any members of committee that would like to ask any questions or comments? Okay, can I get a motion to receive the presentation? Moved by Councillor Palachi. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And adopt staff report. All in favor? Carried. Just members of the audience, there are some seats here to my left. If anyone, instead of sitting on, more than welcome to come here. Our staff have move to the back so you can, there's some seats here if you require. We now go on to item 4.3, city-initiated official plan amendment to remove shale protection policies from Northwest Brampton. My apologies, 4.2, which is the Pigeon Co-op setback requirement. Is there anyone here that'd like to hear a presentation by staff regarding the Pigeon Co-op setback requirements? Pigeon Coop. Nobody? Okay. Are there any questions by committee for staff? Okay, for check. Nope. Okay, so can I get a motion to? Yes, please. So again, members of the audience, it's a city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment regarding pigeon coop setback requirements citywide. Yes, please. If you can just state your name and sign in after at the delegation.
Sure. So my name is Vineet Farwaha, and I'm here in regards to 4.2. So I would first of all like to thank each and every one of you for the amendment that you guys are proposing and ready to approve. And that is I just want to go over it. It says any accessory building or structure used in whole or in part for the purpose of keeping more than 2 pigeons shall be set back a minimum of 7.6 meters, which is 25 feet, away from any dwelling unit, school, or any building used for residential, institutional, or commercial purposes, other than, so this is what's being changed, other than premises occupied exclusively by the property owner or keeper of the pigeons, and other persons residing in the same dwelling. So this, where it says for any dwelling unit, we are completely 100% satisfied with the fact that the minimum setback should be 7.6 meters from any school, any building used for residential, institutional, or commercial purposes. But when it comes to dwelling units, the problem that arises is that, especially for semi-detached homes in Brampton, the lot sizes are so small. It's almost impossible to get that 25-foot setback from the front corner of the shed on either side to the dwelling on either side of it, if that makes sense. So what we're proposing is, yes, and again, we definitely appreciate the fact that now the pigeon coop is able to extend further towards the actual dwelling that it is being made upon, but it's the setbacks that we're concerned with in regards to the corner of each neighbor. You know what I mean? Yes. So we're proposing that maybe we can do, I converted it, so 4.57 meters, which roughly converts to 15 feet. If that, we can sort of move forward with that, and especially if there aren't any issues from the neighbors. Because, you know, we can get petitions signed and that sort of thing. If anybody does have a problem, then of course we can address it in a different manner. But where the bylaw stands right now, it's so hard to actually be able to meet these guidelines.
So members of the committee, probably we might benefit from staff coming forward and just doing a presentation or walking us through the report, just so that we have that context. And then after we'd be able to open it up for further questions by our committee, and you'd be more than happy to come back and maybe give you a second delegation if you'd like. So I would propose that. So if you can just return your seat, and I'll invite staff to come and speak to the report.
I'm sure. And just one thing, I just wanted to actually point out how many people actually did show up in regards to this bylaw. So everybody here for 4.2, can you raise your hands? We're sort of separated because it was so full in here.
Okay.
And there would have been so many more people, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will invite staff, please.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, members of council, members of staff, and members of the public for attending today's public meeting. My name is Shaheenaz Ashash. I'm the policy planner assigned to reviewing the delegation request that was made back in February of this year as it relates to staff considering to provide further relief or amending the city's regulations in regards to pigeon coop setback requirements. The purpose of the information report related to this public meeting is to provide information to the public and to seek feedback on a city-initiated draft zoning bylaw amendment. The proposed amendment would apply citywide. So as it stands, this would not affect properties that have already received a approval for a variance through the minor variance process. To date, we received council direction back in February of this year to review our zoning bylaw provision as it relates to pigeon coop setbacks. And a notice of the public meeting went out through the Brampton Guardian in August 18 of this year. And today we are hosting the public meeting. The delegation request that was made to council on February 27 of this year was made by the representative of the Flying Tippler Club of North America, requesting that the city consider making an amendment to the animal control bylaw to reduce the setback requirements for pigeon coops from building structures and property lines. And the specific request that was made is on the slide before you. So the request was to consider amending it to read, each pigeon coop be only 10 feet or 3 meters away from any dwelling that is being constructed on or around, and that each pigeon coop be only 2 feet or 0.6 meters from each property line of the property on which it is located. An amendment is not required to the animal control bylaw since the provision is cited in the zoning bylaw. So the purpose of the amendment that we're proposing here today is to update the zoning bylaw to address the setback requirements between a pigeon coop and surrounding dwellings, which has essentially remained the same since it was originally enacted in 1981. The current bylaw as it reads is found in section 10.3M, accessories buildings of the zoning bylaw, which currently reads, any accessory building or structure used in whole or in part for the purpose of keeping more than 2 pigeons shall be set back a minimum of 7.6 meters or 25 feet from any dwelling unit, school, or any building used for residential, institutional, or commercial purposes. Staff had conducted a technical analysis to understand what we could potentially propose. We benchmarked 10 municipalities, including the city of Brampton, located in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. And this specific graph shows the pigeon coop setback requirements from buildings in meters for different municipalities. Of all the municipalities reviewed, Brampton was among the least restrictive with respect to setback requirements from the pigeon coop to adjacent buildings and structures. The average setback from any dwelling or building from the municipalities benchmarked is 10 meters or 33 feet. Oshawa was the lowest, which was 7 meters on the far left of the graph, or 23 feet. And Cambridge was the highest at 15 meters or 49 feet. And just as a reminder, Brampton's current provision has a setback requirement of 7.6 meters or 25 feet. Looking at the same municipalities, we also took a look at the setback requirements from the pigeon coop to the property line. And Brampton's setback from the pigeon coop to the property line is 0.6 meters or 2 feet, which is one of the lowest that you could see on the table. And Mississauga is the highest at 6.1 meters or 20 feet. So we found that Brampton is among the least restrictive and is generally consistent with other municipalities in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. That being said, the city the city is able to propose an amendment to the existing provision as it relates to the pigeon coop setbacks. Similar to other municipalities such as Vaughan, Hamilton, and London, they exclude the pigeon keeper or the owner's dwelling from that setback requirement calculation, so that's 7.6 meters or 25 feet. Our proposed change is shown in red on this slide in bold. And residents, and this is the proposed amendment that we are bringing forward for your consideration, residents will continue to have the opportunity to request a minor variance for a reduction in the setback requirement to dwellings located on surrounding lots through the Committee of Adjustment for unique circumstances. And staff find that the proposed amendment provides flexibility to pigeon keepers, but it also maintains appropriate setbacks to neighbors. And it's also a similar approach taken by other municipalities in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area. As for next steps in the process, we expect to assess any feedback that we receive here today, and any comments and delegations that come forward. And that will be considered towards the recommendation report that will go forward. We're hoping to bring a recommendation report to council later on this year in the winter. And then staff will continue to review applications currently on the existing zoning provisions. And here on the slide, the report and the associated presentation will be available on the city website. And again, my name is Shahinaz Ashash. If you have any follow-up questions or any comments that you might have, I'm here to take any comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, for those who would like to delegate, please come forward. If you're not comfortable delegating tonight, you can send in your comments to the City of Brampton or to your respective councillors, and we'll be more than happy to forward it to our planning department. Members of committee, Councillor Singh.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask staff, are they going to capture everybody's comment? I think she's speaking for everybody, so just want to make sure it doesn't seem in the report it's just one person coming forward, but as a group that they're counted in the comments for the public meeting.
The comments will be captured, and I think there's an understanding that there's a group, and that was a spokesperson.
Good, okay.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to receive the delegation, Oh, would you like to come back and? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, can I get a motion to receive the delegation and the staff report? Moved by Councillor Willens. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We go on to item 4.3. Would anyone in the audience like to hear a presentation or see a presentation regarding city-initiated official plan amendment to remove shale protection policies from Northwest Brampton Heritage Heights, Ward 6? No. Going once. Oh, Councillor Paleshi.
Well, I don't want to hear a presentation.
Okay.
I was just going to ask that we move forward item 5.2, the delegation on this item. At this time?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, there was a request for a delegation. It is a statutory public notice item, so anybody can come forward and speak to this item, but
Yeah,
Scott Snyder is requested to speak.
So whoever would like to delegate, please come forward. Yes, you can. Please. Mr. Scott Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. My name's Scott Snyder. I'm counsel to the Northwest Brampton Landowners Group and the Heritage Heights Landowners Group. And,
So if I just give you a couple minutes so people can, my apologies, if people can leave, yeah. Just give it a couple minutes then. Okay.
Thank you. And we're, as you noted, noted, we're here to speak to the staff report that is addressing the removal of the shale protection policies in Northwest Brampton. And fundamentally, we agree with much of the staff report. Generally, the staff support the removal of the shale protection policies for Northwest Brampton. And as you know, the region adopted what's called ROPA 32 to do that very thing at the regional level. But it's also going to require a local official plan amendment, and that's what your report is about. Where we part ways with staff is not in substance, but in process. Staff recommend that the city proceed to circulate the OP, but not bring it forward for adoption because of an outstanding appeal by the province of the regional ROPA 32. And respectfully, we believe that would be a mistake. And I say that for three fundamental reasons. First of all, while ROPA 32 is a regional OPA, this is about Brampton and Brampton's future. Whether Northwest Brampton, after 20-odd years of planning and over $100 million in municipal infrastructure alone, to support urban development, will sit waiting for a quarry that the city has been clear it doesn't want, and no one has or will propose, given the land values at play in Northwest Brampton, whether we'll do that or whether we will finally move forward with planning that community. And we think it's critical for the city to take charge of its future in Northwest Brampton and not sit back and wait for the region or the province to dictate what happens in this area. So that's number one. The second reason is that I think the city has an essential role to play in resolving the outstanding appeal of ROPA 32. Yes, the province appealed, but the city must communicate full support in and confidence in ROPA 32 and the elimination of the shale protection policies. The best way to do that is to pass your own OPA to implement that direction, to demonstrate Brampton's resolve to remove those shale protection policies and to move forward with planning in Northwest Brampton. That will bring you immediately to the table in ROPA 32. And if there's going to be an appeal of this amendment, so be it. This city needs to be at the table with the region, supporting the region in dealing with the province. And I say the best way to succeed at a hearing is to avoid it. And the best way to avoid it is to be at the table with the region as a full party and participant in that process. So that's how that will really happen. And lastly, the Planning Act, the third reason, clearly contemplates this sort of situation and allows for concurrent processing of a related official plan amendments. So yes, your OP has to conform to the regional OP. That one's not yet enforced, but the Act allows you to move forward and adopt it as a pending amendment. And of course, that's why, and you may have forgotten, I wouldn't blame you for this because I forgot until my junior told me, reminded me, my client applied to remove those shale protection policies back in 2017, both at the regional and local level with concurrent amendments. And that's because you need them both to move it forward. So don't wait. I understand why staff, they want to economize. I respect that. It's not that I don't hear that, but I say there's more important things at play than the economy. We have to demonstrate that this city knows what it wants in Northwest Brampton and knows how to get it. And that is to bring forward your own official plan amendment and to support the region in the one that endorses where you want to go. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions of clarification? Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not have any questions. I have comments. Can I go ahead and make those comments now?
In the form of a question?
Let's say yes. So many members of committee that were here last term have heard me talk about this issue a number of times. Even the new members to this term have heard me talk about this a number of times and are probably all rolling your eyes like Pleshy's going to go on one of his rants again. I'm not going to do that. It's going to be very simple. I agree with everything that Scott has said. I have said everything that Scott has said in the past. I agree this is the right thing to do. Therefore, be it resolved, I have a motion that I'd like to put on the screen. It's 4 easy paragraphs, and I'll start reading it. Whereas the Region Appeal passed a regional official plan amendment which removes all the shale protection policies excluding the portion outside of the regional or urban boundary and within the provincial Greenbelt area plan area, while continuing to recognize existing shale extraction designations within Northwest Brampton, whereas the Region Appeals Official Plan Amendment was adopted on July 11, 2019, and was appealed by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing on August 1st, 2019. Whereas the city initiated official plan amendment to remove shale protection policies from Northwest Brampton recommendation report states we will not proceed until the appeal between the province and the region is resolved. Therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to bring back the implementing OPA for the November Planning Committee so that we, the City of Brampton, can protect our position and fate at the LPAT hearing with the region appeal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm just here conferring members of committee with our city clerk. As in this motion brought forward by Councillor Palashi, there's direction in the last paragraph. And as this is a statutory public meeting, I'm not sure if direction could be given. I've spoken to our city clerk. I believe that we'd have to waive our procedural bylaw to consider the motion as direction.
So I don't believe, so Mr. Chair, if I still have, there's direction within the staff report. So it's not necessarily just a planning report. It clearly states in the staff report that we will be waiting until the region and the LPAT make a decision. So therefore, I'm stating here today, let's go ahead with the OPA and let's fight our position with the region. This is our city. I'm tired of the province trying to dictate what we should be doing with our land in our city. And I can go on my rant again if you want.
Duly noted, but I'm waiting for the city clerk to provide us with some guidance on how we can entertain your motion without breaking our procedural bylaw.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the two staff recommendations in the statutory public meeting report are one, to receive the report, and two, to receive comment from tonight's statutory public meeting and then report back. It's not specific on reporting back. Councillor Palashi's motion on the screen is specific to reporting back in November. I do note, however, that the operative paragraph is to be directed to bring back an implementing official plan amendment, and perhaps if that language was removed and just direct staff to report back, then council or planning committee can make an appropriate consideration of the item and make a recommendation to council in November. So then it's not directional if the words implementing OPA were removed.
So I'll look to our planning staff for any comment.
Through the chair and members of committee, certainly staff can take this as direction to deal with it, because we have a staff report to report back on the outcome of the meeting as well. So we can take it as direction to do just that.
And to bring it back for November. So it's achieving the same thing.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy with that.
Happy with direction then?
Yes. No, a motion, but with withdrawing
That we're taking out implementing OPA for November.
Yeah, bring back the OPA for
Okay,
November.
so we'll strike that out. Okay. Our members of the committee, no questions or comments? We have a motion by Councillor Palashi regarding essentially a report back. Would any members of the committee require that we read this out? Are you okay? Okay, all in favor?
Sorry, just for clarification, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. So then the actual motion would be, therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to report back to the November Planning and Development Committee so that
That's correct.
the city can protect its position, and then committee can consider an appropriate
Are you
recommendation
okay with
at
that,
that time.
Councillor Palashi?
Just put in the OPA there. They're bringing back the OPA anyways. We're asking it to come back in November, right?
Just take out implementing. Okay, again, so motion as amended by Councillor Palashi. All in favor? Hands up. Carried, thank you. Can I get a motion?
Ask who's against.
Can I get a motion to receive the delegation and staff report? Councillor Williams, all in favor? Carried, thank you very much. We go on to, I believe, report for regarding the application to amend the zoning bylaw. 12 Henderson Avenue, Ward 3. Are there any members of the public who would like to come down and delegate? Nope. Okay, please come forward, state your name for the record, and if you can, we'll have a staff person come to and sign in. Yeah. Yeah, please. Again, for anyone standing up, there are empty seats here. Feel free to make your way over. Okay, please state your name for the record.
My name is Imelda Petrov. I live at 7 Sheard Avenue. And I've been in Brampton for 47 years. You are about to change my situation in my environment. And from what I can get or see, I don't like it and they don't like it. So I'm speaking just from my heart and from what I have from my neighbors. You're going to put an apartment. They're going to wreck a whole bunch of land that are, how would you say, that could be used for something else. I don't want that many, well, how would you say, so many people and so many cars that's going to go around our crowded street. And I'm very disappointed with the people who designed it. I was speaking to one of the lady who was there. She told me what you have planned for it. I mean, I guess money talks or something like that. But I know it's my city, my Brampton, and my kids were born here, and when they come back, they're not going to like what they see around my area. Because right now, when you people decided to build a right on Henderson, corner of Henderson and Sheard Avenue, you decided to build a mental health complex. You don't remember it? I do. You remember?
Yeah. So you're talking about the Region Appeal building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, whoever did it at that time, I don't have my paper here because I lost at the last meeting that we had before June. How would you say? I got the letter and the secretary or whoever is in charge of it left sort of a blank page in the back. But what she did, she's smart, somebody told her to do that. Put the blank page in the back, mark the date when you were going to have the meeting in June. Okay? Because when you go and look like that, you see a blank sheet, you don't see the date. So you might have tricked me then. You would have seen my face there. But I'm here now. Anyway, what I don't like at that time when you presented that mental place there, I've had nothing but trouble with the people. I have people who sell dope, drugs. I have needles. I have, how would you say, there was a part of, what do you call it, transport cab used to be, they would pick up skids and put it under the place so they could have a place to do their thing. Anyway, I finally got after the cops, and we finally got a lot of people out of there, and they were, how would you say, it's still not finished, but it's a little bit quiet. I'm going to be getting close to it, 80 years old, and I really would like to have some quiet time. I don't mind having a lot of shenanigans and things. I can pass that over my head. But what you're planning there with all those cars that's going to be, where the heck are they going to exit? Are you planning to plant, on Royce Avenue years ago, you wanted the street to go right up to McLaughlin Road, and we defied you, didn't we? You darn right we did. Now you're planning to go and do the same thing with Sheard Avenue, and you did the same thing with Jessie Street too.
So maybe I would just, it's not us, the city of Brampton, it's an
But I'm
applicant.
pointing at you, and I mean you represent them, so that's, you're stuck
we
with it,
don't-
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry if some of you can't understand me, but I have French in me, so what can you do, huh? We speak like we walk, and I can't walk very straight, so I'm crooked a little bit. But anyway, you tried to put the street there, so I figured out, when I read this thing, I said, oh, they're up to their little sneaky things again. So, what the planning, whoever the planning is it you guys?
No, there's an applicant, so it's a private entity, it's a
Oh, okay.
private
All right, because I
applicant.
had something to tell you.
We're simply here at the stage to take those comments,
Okay,
and then our planning staff will go and consider the application. So no decision's been made tonight,
okay.
so we value your feedback, and
I'm
if
not
any...
finished, I've done a minute.
Yep, go ahead.
Because when you planned that, when you were planning this, did you think for later on that you were gonna plant a street, or I know the LRT is gonna plant around there, but did you plan to have a street come out of that Henderson thing and go right straight to McLaughlin Road?
So these are the considerations our planning staff will look at.
Yeah, I thought so, they were gonna come back up to us again.
Yeah,
Anyway, I said my piece.
I thank you,
I hope you have good luck.
thank you.
I really don't like this around me, but I guess I have no choice. Anyway, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you very much. And just for
And if-
information, the LRT, this council passed a resolution that now we prioritize for Ontario. So, shouldn't,
By the way, I meant to ask you, just a second. When gum paper was out of there, they had, what do you call, chemical. I never got that report. How come?
well, you're talking about a chemical?
Yes, there was chemical at the gum paper thing, just on one side. There was a big, not a shack, but there was a big building on that side near their office, and they had chemical in there. I know I see these blue, what the heck
So
is
soil testing tests
Yeah.
and that type
What
of thing.
happened to them?
So staff would be more than happy, maybe on the side, take your contacts, and we'll see if we can find that report for you.
Because
Okay.
they said it just take a couple of months. I've been waiting, and I haven't heard
Okay.
anything.
Well, we'll make sure that staff have their contacts, and we'll
Okay.
make note of it. Thank you very much.
You're
Would
welcome.
anyone else would like to come forth and delegate? Yes, please come forward. State your name for the public record, and sign in after. And just remind everyone in the audience, you have 5 minutes to delegate. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Carol Jarby. I live on Royce Avenue. The last presentation I came for this, it was proposed that there was 171 townhouses being built on the old Gum Papers property. At that time, many of the people in our neighborhood spoke in regards to our concern over traffic. There are only 3 exits out of that closed subdivision. Now, the number has increased to over 400 units, so the traffic is going to more than double coming out of there. We already cannot get out onto McMurtry on most days. It's almost impossible to get out onto Queen. With the new development on Queen Street, the way it was laid out in the last 2 years, bringing it down to 1 lane coming into town, the traffic is backed up. I even spoke to one of the planners in this area who said he cannot get up Queen Street. They know what it's like. So you're now dumping all that traffic into our area. Jesse and Royce are used as cut-throughs for people who can't get around Queen. Those of us who try and get out to go to work, I now cut through Wellington because you can't get down Queen, and you're proposing on dumping now, 400 to 600 cars.
Yeah.
So our concern in the neighborhood, and my concern in the neighborhood, is the traffic that you're gonna put on my street, going by my house, the kids that live there, the racing that goes on that street, and the volume of traffic that's coming.
Thank you. And just part of the application, there is a requirement for a traffic study, and our staff will analyze and consider the traffic study, and they'll be very much part of the decision-making process.
Okay, so when I spoke last time, I was assured by one of my councilmen that we would get, anybody who spoke would get an update sent to them on what was going on in the neighborhood or with that proposal. So I found out about the changes in the proposal through the Brampton Guardian. So obviously, the process you have of sending out notifications to people who speak does not work, is not working, or just is not adhered to. So as part of that traffic plan, will that be sent to me because I've spoken?
I'll hand it over to our staff.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, with respect to the planning process, what we always endeavor to do is follow up with all of the individuals that are speaking to a development application just in advance of a recommendation report coming forward from staff to council for your consideration. So that any residents that are familiar and interested in that particular item, they can choose to attend when the recommendation report is being presented through to committee and council. In this case, because the development application had changed from what it was prior, there was a new application received, a new circulation went out to not only the individuals that were interested in the previous application, but now to everybody again. So in that respect, yes, the publication through the Brampton Guardian has gone out, as well as mailings.
So my question is, as my counselor told me that I would get an update, will I get a personal update on this because I spoke? I was told that last time around, but did not happen.
Okay. Well,
It's a yes or no question.
you will get an update accordingly.
Both my councilmen are right here.
Yeah, and just as a reminder of the planning process, so we can give updates as they're made available. In terms of when at the public hearing and at the statutory public meeting, right now it's just for information. We cannot, and correct me if I'm wrong, municipal act does not allow councillors to interfere in the analysis of the applications. Certainly we will take your concerns, we register, they provide the analysis, and every information that we can share publicly, we will do accordingly. But as our director of planning had suggested, this was a complete new application brought forward by the applicants.
Do we have any idea when that traffic study will be done, or is that something you don't answer here?
So again, through you, Mr. Chairman, with the receipt of this new application, we have received background studies as well, technical studies. So there is a traffic study that's completed at this point in time that would reside with staff. If the individual, anybody interested in this application would like to see any of those documents, they can follow up with Mr. David Vanderberg, who's the planner that's on the file, and really find out, really there is a way in which you can access all of those background studies online at this point in time.
So I should contact Mr. Vanderbilt.
Well, you can, or one of your counselors would be more than happy to
We've
follow
spoken.
up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please come forward, state your name.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Duncan Gibson. I live at 70 Jesse Street, which is on the northwest corner of Haggard and Jesse. My main concern is the traffic that is going to be developed if you have this 400 and some odd residents in a very confined area with no access to anything around. They have to have travel either out through Royce Avenue to McPurchy or up through Haggard to Queen Street. Do you plan to put stoplights at both of those intersections? What's more, if you have over 400 people, I don't know the statistics, but if you have 3 residents per unit and 1.5 vehicles per unit, that means you're putting over 1,200 people in that very confined area. You're having over 600 vehicles in that very confined area. You're making parking spaces for 468. I presume you're going underground. What happens to the other 130 or 40? They're parked on the street. We already have the church and a barber shop and what have you. The street is full of parking all the time. Haggard Avenue, you just can't move it. It's always condensed with traffic, and it's just getting worse. And the traffic on Queen Street, well, you must know what it's like, and it's quite absurd. And I would hope that as much consideration would be given to the residential taxpayers that have been looking at supporting Brampton for the last several years, as much consideration as you do for pigeon coops. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any further delegations? No? Okay, I have Councillor Vicente on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions to staff. How many parking spots are we going to allow the developer to build on this proposal as it is proposed now?
Through the chair, the applicant is proposing 468 parking spaces for the proposed 402 units, and that's the appropriateness of that rate is being reviewed as part of the rezoning application.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, how did they arrive at that number? Or can staff perhaps comment on how many parking spots there should be?
Through the chair, they did do a parking analysis as part of the traffic study to determine that number. It is something that's a lower rate than what the zoning bylaw typically requires. And so the appropriateness again is going to be reviewed through the forthcoming recommendation report.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, what does the zoning bylaw require?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think from a general standpoint, I don't have the exact number that relates to the site at this point in time and relative to the types of units that are being proposed as well. But generally, there's 2 parking spaces per unit that's required, and then there would be some additional fractional parking spaces that would be required for visitor spaces as well.
Thank you. And through you, chairs, so just by a rough calculation, 468 spots for 402 units equals approximately 1.12 parking ratio to unit. That is already substantially lower than what the zoning may require. Why require any parking ratio at all? One of the major concerns we always hear from folks when we have infill, medium or higher density development in existing areas is the potential increase in the amount of traffic of cars. Why require any amount of parking except just for visitors in handicap spaces, given that like a location like this is relatively close to the Queen Street corridor and transit?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, what I'll really respond to with that is that the applicant is proposing, I think, a reduction for those types of reasons in that they are likely wanting to market some of their units to individuals that don't have parking spaces and such. I don't know the exact rationale that they're using to propose that reduction to the amount of parking spaces, but these are generally things that planning staff as a whole and our development side as well as with our policy friends from planning are considering as it relates to reviewing, updating our zoning bylaw requirements, our official plan policies as well.
Okay, because there's an argument to be made here where if the desire is for less vehicles to be part of a proposed development, it's certainly, I think, within the city's purview to reduce the requirement or eliminate all completely. Those are just my comment following my question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. Just a note of clarification. Alan, when you sent out or send out the notices for Henderson for this meeting and for the next meeting, where are they going? Are they going to that same radius that we normally do?
So I'm not sure if I understand the question exactly correctly, but for every public meeting, the radius that goes out really relative to the subject property is 240 meters. So the Planning Act requirement is 120 meter radius, but we here in the City of Brampton do utilize 240. That would have been provided for tonight, and the previous application that we had for the subject site, it would have been 240 meter radius that would have applied at that time as well, I believe.
Okay, because I'm not certain. I know where Mr. Gibson lives, and I'm not sure whether Jesse Street and Royce are within that 240 meters. Did you get a notice?
My next door neighbor
did not. Okay, and Carol, did you receive a notice? Yes. Okay, good. So as long as we're sure that the people who are concerned are getting the notices, I don't want them to find out late, for example, when this comes back to us, that it was here.
Perhaps just a point of clarity through Mr. Chairman. When it is that the notices are going out just in advance of the recommendation report being provided, it'll be a direct letter that's directed right to the individual who's provided the interest to us, the correspondence to us, and it'll be solely a letter at that point in time. Yeah.
Okay, so for tonight's meeting, we're going to have 3 letters go out?
There's more than that on our street. What's the matter with you?
So,
I'm just asking.
Through Mr. Chairman, so yes, it'll be everyone that's noted themselves through tonight's delegations, and anyone that follows up even after tonight as well, really at any point in time up until when the recommendation report's provided, where they reach out to the planner on file, Mr. David Vandenberg, and provide their name, contact information. It's those individuals.
Okay, I will. We'll get back to you off record. Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Fortini?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to ask that, when we mail these to 140, a certain distance, we always have the same problem that certain residents don't receive them. I don't know why we don't do it by mail or something, so they actually receive it. A lot of the new homes don't have mailboxes, and we get these people just delivering, putting them in the door handles, and I know a lot of my residents in some groups, they don't receive them.
Well, just take some cups, take with you, and stick them home.
Thank you, please.
So through.
Yeah, I would ask, please. Okay, thank you.
So through Mr. Chairman, I'll just reference that we do utilize a third-party company that provides the letters really for us, that also do go out through Canada Post. So all the letters do go by way of Canada Post. We do follow up with the third-party company after the fact to ensure that they have gone out appropriately. And so it is always supplemented then by way of the communication, the Guardian as well. So over and beyond the Planning Act's requirements that call for one or the other, being either a letter or the newspaper or advertisements, we do both.
So, thank you. So what I'm hearing, we go beyond the requirement. Certainly, I know there's been an issue that some residents don't receive it, and we'll ensure maybe we look at the service provider and see on the service that they're providing and see if there's any gaps there. So is there no further questions? And can I get a motion to receive the delegations and staff report? Councillor Bowman, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. We go on now to item 4.5, application to amend the zoning bylaw. Gajar Development Incorporated, 10709 Credit View Road, southeast corner of Credit View Road, and El Camino Way, Ward 6. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to hear a delegate, or would like to see a delegation? Presentation, sorry. Okay, well, we'll give it a couple minutes so people can. Is this all Henderson? I don't know.
She doesn't understand the process.
Not sure. Okay, as we move on to item 4.6, 4.5, again regarding a application to amend the zoning bylaw on 10709 Credit View Road, corner of Credit View and El Camino Way. Is there anyone here who would like to hear a presentation? No. Members of the committee, are there any questions or comments? No. Can I get a motion to receive staff report? Moved by Councillor Singh. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now we go on to our delegations. So I believe our first delegation we had mentioned would be Hillside. Okay. So at the request of Councillor Fortini,
Thank you, through the chair. I just asked a lot of the residents, we have an issue on a group home coming over on Hillside, and we did have a little meeting there at the residence, and I'm just looking at a lot of these bylaws, and I don't find it's the right bylaws supporting this group home, and it's regarding that, because most of our bylaws says you have to have at least 8 persons and a full-time operating staff, and they're asking for 6 people, and it should not follow under the group home category. So I have a lot of residents here, and I think I got 3 residents want to delegate. So I'm asking for them to come and delegate, and then we'll ask some questions to staff. I do have many questions.
Okay. Excuse me. So I have, at this point, 4 delegations, and if anybody would like to delegate regarding 23 Hillside Drive, feel free to line up. We have a staff person there in which you can sign up and delegate. Our first person is I believe Mr. Muhammad Ali. If he could come forward. Okay, the second delegation is Al Nones. Our third is Warren Parks. And our fourth is Rebecca Altamira. So if you can, for those who have signed up to delegate, or for those who want to delegate, feel free to register with our staff. If you can state your name for public record, please. And I would just ask everyone in the audience if we can just remain, if we can just respect the fact that we have people who are speaking. Thank you.
My name is Mohammed Ali. I'm a resident of Hillside Drive, 101 Hillside Drive. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair, respected councillors, city officials, and most importantly, the residents of Bramley Woods area for taking the time out of your busy schedule and to address this very important issue that our neighborhood is facing. Okay, I heard earlier about the notifications being sent. So as Vice Chair Pat Fortini mentioned, most of the neighbors in our neighborhood did not get any letter regarding an open house that was conducted at Rebeccaville Assisted Living Facility, 23 Hillside Drive, on August 26th. And only a few of the residents were invited. Since as only a few flyers were circulated, we took the initiative to inform rest of the Bramley Woods residents about the open house. During the open house, several issues were identified regarding the subject property and its intended use. The officials, the city officials, and the property owners and the representatives were unable to answer several questions and legitimate concerns of the community. In fact, the property owner/rep chose not to answer many simple questions. Hopefully, we can get some of the answers through your order here. Okay, excuse me if you don't mind, I'll take the jacket off. It's a little hot here, I don't know. I requested earlier, but they said it will be turned on the air. We'll see. Alrighty. So here's my question. Why do a majority of people in our Bramley Woods community believe that the city's classification of Rebeccaville Assisted Living Residence is incorrect and it should fall under the category of a supportive housing facility or a retirement home? The answer lies within the city bylaws, and here is why. I'm not an expert, so feel free to correct me. I just have a couple of simple questions. So if you take a look at the handout that has been given to some of the residents here, and with your permission, I have more copies if anybody else would like to look at it. These are just the definitions of the group home, the retirement home, and the supportive living facilities.
So if you look at that handout and the definitions of the three categories, namely the group home type 1, the retirement home, and the sportive housing facility, I would like to draw your attention to the definition of a sportive housing facility towards the bottom of the page on the handout. Sportive housing facility shall mean a place, and this is word for word from Brampton City zoning bylaws. Sportive housing facility shall mean a place for the accommodation of persons who, by reason of their emotional, mental, social, or physical condition or legal status, require a supervised group living arrangement for their well-being, but shall exclude a foster home as defined in the Child and Family Services Act or successor legislation. So it does not need a code expert or a zoning specialist to figure out that the proposed use of 23 Hillside Drive as Rebecca-ville assisted living residence, assisted by definition means supportive, perfectly fits the definition of supportive housing facilities. My question through you, Chair, is can the city officials explain why not classify the proposed use of 23 Hillside Drive as a supportive housing facility instead of a group home type 1?
Thank you. Would staff like to respond?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ali, thank you for the question. Just for clarification, supportive housing is a broad definition in the zoning bylaw. Okay, so this type of housing, I guess broadly you could say, meets a category of supportive housing. But within the zoning bylaw, it is more specifically defined. So we've said, just like any other housing, you can say we have residential housing, broad category. Then we have single detached, semi-detached, townhome, more specifically defined in the zoning bylaw. It's very similar in this case. We have supportive housing as a broad category, but then within that, you'll find three types, actually four. There's group home type 1, group home type 2, there's a retirement home, and then there's, generally speaking, supportive housing that doesn't meet one of those more specifically defined categories. So in this case, what we have before us, although is a type of supportive housing, is more specifically defined as a group home type 1.
Can I follow up on that?
Yes.
Yeah. Please. Okay, so from my understanding, when you look at the definitions, to me, in general terms, the group home type 1 is more broad of a definition, and you can feel free to look through it. I have it right here, as per the bylaw, compared to a sportive home. If you look at the details, to me, sportive home, this is where I tend to, with due respect, disagree with you. Sportive home falls under the category, although I don't like to lump them in, but you initiated that 4 types are under the category of a sportive home. If anything, it's the other way around. The group home type 1, group home type 2, then you have the retirement homes, supportive home, foster homes, and all the other kinds. Now, I saw an email going around to the neighbors, one of the neighbors who couldn't make it tonight, but I was just trying to reference a thing from Mr. Rick Conard, the CBO for city building, and he made a reference to section 394. The land use designation I2-section 394 on sheet 62 of Schedule A of this bylaw. So 394 states in there, 394.1 states, shall only be used for the purpose of a sportive housing facility, an apartment dwelling, and purpose of accessory to the other permitted use. But the response that Mr. Conard gave was that, he gave an example of St. Leonard's housing on 1105 Queen Street East, and he's classifying that there are certain areas where only these kinds of housings can go. However, when you look into the definition of the bylaw, it only limits those 3 kinds of facilities for those areas. It doesn't say that these facilities cannot go in other areas. So that is I have the email in writing here. That was the gist of the argument here. And if I may add to that, it also states that under section 394.1 shall only be used for the following purposes: a supportive housing facility, an apartment dwelling, and purposes accessory to the other permitted purposes. For the purpose of Section 394, supportive housing facility shall mean a place of accommodation of persons who, by reason of their legal status, require a supervised group living arrangement for their well-being.
Would you like to ask, my only concern right now is I would invite you to take it on the side and maybe speak with our
Just
planning-
live through your permission, I'd like to request 5 more minutes and that's it.
No, sorry? Would people, is there a motion to allow 5 more minutes to delegate? I need a motion. Well, it's from our committee. I appreciate it. So, okay, moved by Councilor Fortini.
Thank you so
Please
much.
go delegate.
You can count it. It won't be more than 5. So, okay. So here is what and I can send through an email so that everybody can, understand it properly. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'll be the first one to admit. This only applies to the persons by reason of their legal status, not to the persons with mental, emotional, social, or physical condition. Whereas other lands can still have supportive housing facilities. So only those designated areas in 394 cannot have it. There are other areas. Section 394 does not state that other areas outside of designation I2 lands cannot accommodate supportive housing facilities. It simply limits the land use of designated lands I2 on the sheet 62 of Schedule A. Now I would like to draw your attention to the definition of group home type 1. The last sentence states, a group home type 1 shall not include a residence defined as a group home type 2, lodging house, or a foster home or a supportive housing facility. What this statement means is that obviously since the proposed use of the subject property meets the definition of a supportive housing facility, therefore it cannot be defined as a group home type 1. And here's my final point on this. There has been an application with the Retirement Homes Regulatory Authority, RHRA. As most of you are probably aware, this was filed on behalf of the Rebeccaville Assisted Living Residence Limited, based on the written correspondence from RHRA, which I have a copy of the email. RHRA licenses and regulates retirement homes only. I'm quoting written confirmation from RHRA here. We do not license or regulate group homes, end quote. Therefore, technically for 23 Hillside, to meet the RHRA requirements, the facility has to first meet the definition of a retirement home bylaws of the city of Brampton, which states, and I will just skip, I'll just get one point that I wanted to make. It states in there, more than 8 persons in addition to the staff and operator are accommodated in the retirement home. Mr. Chair and the councillors, please note, this house, the application filed with RHRA is for a maximum of 6 people, excluding the operator and the support workers. So, the point being, RHRA only licenses and regulates retirement homes, not group homes. And in order for 23 Hillside to be considered a retirement home, 9 or more persons need to be housed in addition to the staff and the operator. The application received by RHRA clearly states a maximum of 6 persons, as I mentioned. How is it possible that the city can ignore and violate their own bylaws? The city can make selective choices. They cannot, in fact, make selective choices when referring to or applying bylaws. You cannot apply one section of the bylaw while totally ignoring the other relevant parts. It might be convenient to do so, but it is an incorrect practice and must be halted with immediate effect. If the city believes that the definitions in the bylaws are confusing, which honestly I think they are, or contradictory, perhaps it's a good time to revise them. We all make mistakes. I'm the first one to admit. So on behalf of all the residents, I'd like to say that until such time, the issue should be put on hold at the very least. In conclusion, unless all the bylaw requirements are satisfied, the community of Bramley Woods will continue to oppose the blatant violations of the city bylaws and the proposed illegal utilization of a for-profit business at 23 Hillside Drive. This project must be stopped, as letting it pass only contradicts your own bylaws, and it is explicitly making it illegal. Therefore, permission shall not be granted by the city to operate this business in our neighborhood. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Alnones. Again, Warren Parks and Rebecca Altamira, if you can come down so that we can make this quicker. I'll get to questions after. We were coming forward with delegations. Okay, Mr. Alnones, please.
Good evening. I'm a resident of Bramalea Woods. I've lived there for 26 years. And I am here in opposition to the allowance of a group home, or specifically in my case, a retirement residence at 23 Hillside. I'm also in opposition to the city zoning director's determination of the proposed use at 23 Hillside, housing 4 to 6 persons, 65 years of age or older, meets requirements of the bylaw as a group home type 1. That it only requires a separation of 120 meters from other group homes, and that this meets the city's requirement. I'm also in opposition to the Rebeccaville residents, to the fact that the Rebeccaville residence meets all the city's bylaw requirements to be classified as a group home type 1 according to the zoning department. And it be permitted to operate a home for up to 6 seniors at 23 Hillside. I'm also in opposition to the determination that 2 Heath Street meets the definition of group homes type 1, thereby not requiring a separation of 610 meters between it and any group home or any other supportive facility. Now, as a background, in response to the residents' concerns, the proposed seniors residence seeking to locate at 23 Hillside Drive, the Director of Planning and Zoning outlined the reasons why the city was in favor of supporting the Rebeccaville application. The city's position was put forward as such, that the proposed use of the building is specifically defined as a group home type 1, and that the number of individuals will be between 4 and 6 persons, and that the clientele that will be living in that building are 65 years of age or older. And further, that the separation distance requirement is only 120 meters between group homes, and that the maximum number of group homes permitted in each zone or area, as outlined in Schedule D of the zoning bylaw, has been met. And concludes with the provision of 610 meters separation distance requirement only applies to supportive housing facilities that have more than 10 persons and do not fall within the group home 1 or type 2 classification. Also, he made a determination that 2 Heath Street meets the city's definition of group home type 1. My position, which is shared by many of my neighbors, is that the city's determination that the use proposed for 23 Hillside of being a group home type 1 is wrong, completely and totally. In Section 5, page 8, paragraph 5 of the zoning bylaw, the requirements for group home type 1 specifically state that a group home may only house persons over the age of 60 if they are a satellite residence. And Rebeccaville is not a satellite residence, and this is in the bylaws. This was ignored totally. Consequently, it does not meet the requirement to be classed as a Group 1 home. Further, the zoning bylaw, Section 10, page 18, under the heading of supportive housing facility, does not state or require that a supportive facility house 10 or more residents to be classified as supportive facility. That's misleading, it's incorrect, and it's nowhere in your bylaws. Therefore, supportive housing facilities can have as few as 4 to 6 residents and may also be group homes, but the 610-meter separation still applies. Now, as far as 2 Heath Street, Harrison House Peel 2, it provides supervision, housing, meals, dispensation of medication, laundry, and other special supportive services. It houses persons of all ages with special needs who require these services to live independently. The classification of supportive housing facility best fits 2 Heath Street, not just group home. Group home is a catch-all. It's not, as it was described before, a more specific definition. It's a more general definition and a lazy way out. Therefore, there should be a reclassification of this operation so that it requires 610 meters to the next group home, type 1 or 2, or the next specialty supportive services housing. Now, let's talk about Rebeccaville residence. It has many names, but
Sorry,
we're all.
you're at 6 minutes. I need a motion to continue.
I need about
moved
3
by Councillor
minutes.
Williams. Moved
3
by
or 4.
Councillor Williams. Okay, all in favor? Okay, carry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Rebeccaville residents, the group home applicant at 23 Hillside, seeks to and intends to operate what is clearly a retirement home. We find reference to that to the zoning department's own justification for granting the group home type 1 classification. This retirement home is operating under the guise of a group home. It is regulated by the it is regulated as a retirement home, housing less than 10 people. It has filed for registration with the Retirement Home Regulatory Agency. It seeks to house persons of age 65 or older. However, it's a non-complying retirement home, and it may not operate as a group home. It doesn't meet the city's bylaw of 9 residents. So they could never approve this use on their own anyway, without a variance. Specifically, the zoning bylaw, section 10, page 18 states the retirement homes must accommodate more than 8 residents, and retirement homes shall not include a group home, a supportive housing facility. So it's a whole new animal. Now, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's got to be a duck. And this is clearly a retirement home. It's non-compliant to your rule. However, it is what it is, and it's regulated by the upper tier government as a retirement home. It is a member of retirement home associations, and they have stated that they intend to house seniors over 65. So why are we here calling it a group home? The applicant calls it a retirement home. He only uses the term group home because it's convenient, and our bylaws can't be used for convenience to skirt rules that are already in place. Further, I just want to conclude now. I first came to know about this issue on the afternoon that they were having their first open house. I had about a half hour's warning. I turned up at this meeting and I questioned Mrs. Isaacs, or Miss Isaacs, okay, as to her experience in running group homes or senior citizens' homes. She stated that she had substantial experience, in fact, owned one. I went on to ask, so can you tell us what the name of this home is, where it is, so we might go there and have a look at it? I was very bluntly told it was none of my business. Now, that made me suspicious right away. So I did a little research on there was a Esterville retirement home, or Esterville Manor. The company was incorporated in 2014, and in 2017, Esterville Manor received an inspection for the RHRA, and it had no less than 39 sections of the governing act violated through 34 separate violations, all involving handling of drugs, safety, health, safety of the occupants, security of the occupants, and I can't find out how that was resolved. The only thing I know is that Esterville is no longer in operation. So we don't have an operator here that I have much faith in. And today I've come to know some other things that make me quite unhappy. Our residents are now starting to be inspected for illegal basement apartments. I don't know where these requests are coming from, okay, but the illegal basement apartments is nothing. It is just someone is looking to harass the neighborhood for carrying out its civic duty in ensuring that bylaws are followed before things are allowed to change. So perhaps City Council could find out who has been lodging these complaints because they're subject to confidentiality. And if they're coming from one source and they amount to harassment, they should do something about it. Thank you.
Guys, as I appreciate the applause, we'll be here all night. We need to give everyone an opportunity. I remind everybody, 5 minutes. If you can keep your delegation to 5 minutes. Mr. Warren Parks, please.
Chair and members of the council. I've been a Brandon Lodge resident all my life. I grew up in the D section. I've had 4 different houses in Brampton. Don't quite understand how all the bylaws work. That's for the lawyers to deal with, but I do know that what's going on here is not right. I guess I was once again notified like a week before. The letters that went out only went out to the people on Hillside Drive, and not everyone received them. We've got 3 other little cul-de-sacs on Hillside Drive. We've got 3 other entrances that there was very little notices that went out. To me, how the city does their notices and sends them out, somebody should be looking at where they're going, right? I know this was a last minute request and they only had a week to put them out, but for the future, they should be sending it to our whole neighborhood. It appears from the community meeting, there are a substantial number of issues. I'm not gonna go into all the bylaw issues, but there was a lot of concerns raised. There was a city member there that took notes and minutes of all the concerns. We haven't seen any reply yet on any of that, or even the minutes or notes. I understand they're busy, but that would be part of our request, that we get at least the notes taken from the questions before any decisions made, and then also the responses from the city, right? So that if we need to take further action, we have an opportunity to do that before anything's allowed to go further in this. One thing that we have found out through that community meeting and the different information put out to our community from that house is there's a lot of disinformation. We haven't had anything accurate. As you see by the different, they apply this way, they apply that way to try and skirt bylaws. Now, some of it may be by guidance by the city, but it doesn't seem that way. They renovated this house before applying for any permits. They did plumbing in the house. As far as I know, there was no plumbing permit taken out. If you're going to be caring for people in this house, it's no longer a residence. To me, they put stair lifts in throughout the house and other assisted things. To me, that should have had somebody inspecting them structural. If I build a commercial type building and I put stuff like that in, you're getting structural details and whatever so that the inspector can see it and make sure they're done that way. I understand in residence you don't make them do that, but this is no longer a residence. The other thing is I don't understand how the city does it. They may look at it. If there's a variance application or something like this, we should be notified before it happens, not after it happens. They were almost to the point that people were moving in before we found out. It was only because they applied for a building inspection and the city inspector found the sprinklers weren't done right, there was no basement entrance, that they put a stop on anything. And that's when we started to find out about this. They cut down a tree, no permit. Now, a lot of people do it. You know, it's a matter of getting caught and somebody complaining. As the gentleman said, you know what, there's a lot of pissed off residents in region in our little area. So yes, they know about this basement apartment, they know about this house it has. So at that residents meeting, everything was brought to the bylaw officer and the complaints were made. So now that is up to him to investigate. So I don't think that they're necessarily malice or one person creating a harassment policy. They're just saying we want our neighborhood cleaned up. It's been going on long enough. So Bramley Woods was originally planned as a more exclusive neighborhood. That's the original planning of it. My great uncle built it. People go in, there's no sidewalks. We walk on the street, we walk our dogs on the street to the parks. By putting in a residence like this, we're gonna add traffic. We're gonna all sorts of different people coming into our neighborhood that we can't let our kids out front, whatever. We don't know who the residences are gonna be. We don't know the actual type of care that's gonna be provided because we haven't got a straight answer yet. We don't know if we're gonna have people with Alzheimer's or have dementia or any other issues, criminal records. What are they bringing into our neighborhood? It's not that we say they can't come in. They've got to do it properly and make sure that we are prepared because they're bringing down our property values if they do things wrong. The second thing is they've skirted all these, and like the previous speaker said, a previous house that the owner was involved in had 34 violations in an inspection of 37 items or whatever it was. What are they going to do next? It's easier to beg forgiveness than it is to do it right. So my last house was on Valonia Drive, and at the end of my street, there was a big blue house for 4 years before I moved. And that's because we didn't do things right at the start. And not necessarily the city doing stuff right, they just caught up every time. You have an opportunity to stop everything and do it right from the start now. So that's what we're requesting. So as I said, I'll sum up so that we're not going over. For any action taken, can we please get the city's, I guess, interpretations? We have requested for the information on the the provincial application, right? What is the backing information, not just what it states on the application? Are they going to bring in people that they don't state after they open up? Because at that point, we can't stop it. We can complain. It takes 5 years to stop it, right? There's a couple of warnings, a couple of fines. They're making money off it every day. So also, before we go forward, also we would like a summary of the questions, responses from the city, the interpretations of the bylaws, and I know I asked, there is a current building application in before they process it, and I know that may not be your under your domain, but they should be investigating the plumbing work, the other work. Was there an application to go? They should not approve a new permit until they investigate that. It's quite evident when you walk through the house, the sprinklers were already done. They didn't even have an application in, right? The plumbing was done. So I'm assuming there was no permit for that either, right? So I'll end it with that, but I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Rebecca Altamira.
Thank you, members of council, Mr. Chair, and city staff. We're grateful to live in a country where we're free to exercise our civic rights. This evening, residents would like to discuss the matter of great importance. I'm referring to 23 Hillside Drive in the beautiful community of Bramley Woods. On Monday, August 26, Councilors Fortini and Williams attended an open house which was hosted by Esther Isaacs, the administrator of Rebeccaville Assisted Living Residence. The residents within the 120 meters of 23 Hillside Drive were notified of the meeting and the application for a home at 23 Hillside Drive. Unfortunately, the majority of residents were not notified about the meeting to discuss 23 Hillside Drive, It was only through the concern of neighbors whom did receive the communication that other residents were notified. I personally did not receive the letter. As a taxpayer, I was frustrated to learn that I was not notified. I was also disappointed when I learned that the city mailed this letter in an official envelope, and the contents of the letter were written on the letterhead of the business Rebeccaville Assisted Living. Since when does the city, or should I say the taxpayer, pay for mailing something on behalf of a business? The residents of Bramalea Woods are disappointed by the lack of communication from our city and regional councilors with regard to the proposed home at 23 Hillside Drive in the community of Bramalea Woods, city staff included. How can we have a say about our community if we're not informed or know what's going on? I would ask by a show of hands, excluding our ward councilors, Fortini and Williams, as to how many councilors and city staff have actually visited the neighborhood of Bramalea Woods in regards to the application at 23 Hillside Drive. Anyone? City staff? No. Our neighborhood is over 30.
Just for clarification, this was an added agenda item, so we could not be forewarned.
No, sir, that was not my question.
Sorry,
Not to be
but you asked if
disrespectful.
we visited regarding 23 Hillside, but this was brought forward by Councilor Fortini, so no one on council was given the opportunity to visit 23 Hillside because it was not on the agenda.
Okay, I will give you
Thank
that.
you.
I would ask city staff who know about 23 Hillside and the proposal of 23 Hillside, who actually visited the area? Point taken. Our neighborhood's over 30 years old. Some of the homes are still inhabited by the original owners and second-generation families. They're hoping to pass down to the third generation. Bramalea, originally the township of Chinguacousy, merged to become the town of Brampton and later the city of Brampton. It was created as an innovative new town or satellite city and was developed as a separate community from the city. Each phase of Bramalea was named using progressive letters of the alphabet starting with A, including up to P, with the exclusion of I and O. It's just a little history for anybody that doesn't know that. Bramalea Woods is part of the encompassing L section, which is a unique geographical area in the city of Brampton. There is no other area like this in all of Canada that we know of, referring to the A through P. Did you know back in the early stages of planning Bramalea, one of the homes in the L section was awarded for an innovative technology? If you knew our community, you would know that 23 Hillside is not a viable location for a business of any kind. Why? It will decrease our property values. How do I know that? The people that currently live beside and across do not want it there, are worried about selling their homes, and they wouldn't buy in an area like that. It will create safety issues for our children. Because we have no sidewalks, there will be additional traffic. The increased traffic and parking is already a problematic issue. This is even a greater concern for our residents with the recent addition to the Bramalea Baptist Church, which I didn't know was happening until the building was erected. But the problems do not stop there for the residents of Bramalea Woods. Every day we're faced with racing traffic up and down our street. Tents with homeless people are living in Laurel Crest Park. That is a fact. Lodging houses are an issue. Motorcycles and scooters are driving on our pathways. Drug needles in our playgrounds. Drug deals happening in broad daylight. Youth sitting at the picnic table adjacent to St. Jean d'Arc School, where my daughter attends, with bongs in open sight. There's overgrowth in our parks and walkways due to the lack of proper mowing and cutting, and then we lost the removal of the leaf vacuuming program. Aging infrastructure with stormwater is another issue, and the coyote problem. which I fortunately was notified about, but the folks who live directly behind the issue on Lancewood Crescent were not. But the issues need to be looked at holistically, not just isolated issues. Our beautiful neighborhood of Bramalea needs help. Councillors, we need your help. Most homeowners do their part by maintaining their properties. However, not all do. And it doesn't seem like property standards or bylaw seem to get involved to the point of making a change. We would ask that the City of Brampton recognize Bramalea Woods as a very niche community. There is no other community like it in Brampton. Bramalea Woods boasts 0 lot lines, big properties, and unique homes. All are individual, they are not cookie cutter.
Sorry, can I get a motion? We've bypassed motion by Councillor Williams. All in favor to allow more time? Okay.
I'm wrapping it up. Please help us preserve our neighborhood as it's the first of its kind in all of Canada, a satellite city it was called. We do not want a business at 23 Hillside Drive. You can label it whatever you want. It will bring in more traffic and noise and chaos to our beautiful city. In closing, I'd like to leave you with a few excerpts from local real estate ads, which should give you a better understanding of how beautiful Bramalea Woods is perceived from the outside. First ad, prestigious Bramalea Woods, meticulously maintained, showstopper. This home is on a quiet street. You could not find a better, more mature neighborhood in Brampton. Ad 2, Bramalea Woods, sensational, one-of-a-kind home nestled in highly desirable Bramalea Woods. This Tudor-style home will enchant you with its cottage-like setting on beautiful landscaped lot. Ad 3, Bramalea Woods, one of Brampton's best-kept secrets. It's surrounded by parks, forest, lake, walking trails, and breathtaking scenery. Here you will find luxury detached homes on large lots, some backing onto the forest. Homes in this area, which include detached that were built over 30 years ago, are desirable to home buyers who love old neighborhoods with lots of trees and uniquely designed homes. Does this sound like the right place for a business? Please help the residents of Bramalea Woods maintain their niche community. Please stop this business from taking up residency in our community. I would also add that with regard to 23 Hillside, there are bedrooms in the basement. When the posting for the ad in the real estate market was listed, there was no stair lift in the picture. It was added after the fact. And my understanding is by someone in the neighborhood that that has been recently taken out. I would also add that there are bedrooms in the basement without proper access should there be a fire or other issue where those residents need to get out. So again, on behalf of our wonderful community, Bramalea Woods, please know that we are not going to be silenced. We want issues resolved. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so before, did you? Okay, please come forward. State your name for public record, please.
Yeah, my name is Nina Petrov. I'm the resident of 26 Linden Crescent. I've overheard that my home has been targeted for different libelous comments. I want to state for the record that my home is not a group home. It's a foster home. I'm a foster parent, and under the law, I'm entitled to have foster kids. Every time that I have relatives from India, I'm married to an Indian man, we are subjected from the city to have inspections. I've had 2 inspections to see if we're renting to people, and we're not. We do not have a kitchen in the basement. We do not rent, period. And anybody that's over 18 years of age in my home gets a criminal record check because I have children that I have to look after. And it's just this is just a statement for everybody in the community to know that I'm a law-abiding citizen. I have no criminal records, and if the police does show up after my daughter or one of my foster kids run away, that will happen. This is our protocol. As per the ministry, we have to call the police, and they show up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. They're not necessarily bad kids. They just need a home, and I happen to be the foster mom. I've had a kid now for 5 years that I'm going to adopt, and right at this moment, I only have one kid living in a 6-bedroom house. So if anybody have qualms, they can come and ask me instead of gossiping about me and slandering me. They can come and talk to me, and I will show them that, basically we don't have anybody living in our home other than relatives when they come from India, and they stay a long time because India is not like next door, and that's it. So that's the statement that I wanted to make.
Thank you very much.
But my neighbors are great, and I don't think that we need a group home. We already have a retirement home at the Brandy City Center, and other than that, I live next door to great neighbors. They help me with my yard sometimes because of my disabilities, but we have a great community.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So would you like? Okay, please state your name for public record.
My name is Donna Anglin. So I'm a part of the Rebecca-ville, who applied for the permit. So we applied for a permit. The first thing that we did was actually inquire from the city if a group home type 1 could be at that resident. For the record, a business was operated out of that property before it was purchased. Also, for the record, the neighbors before complained about that they did not get a letter, and that's false. Communication was sent out to the entire neighborhood. What it is, Esther Isaac, who is the administrator, she started receiving calls, because on the letter, which is part of the city's protocol, when you send out the letter, your letterhead is there and stating when it's going to be an open house. That was received by residents, I don't know how much, and they started to question, where does she work? How much did she purchase the property for? And all of these intrusive questions. I said to Esther, come, let us have a talk with the community, because we're going in. We want to know our neighbors and see what their concerns were. We had a little small meeting Saturday morning, which was attended by primarily like half of the group here, which they're saying that they did not before the meeting. That was false. We had a meeting, and the neighbor directly before us was really disgruntled because her concern was the property, the owners before had a business operating vehicles, and it was congested. We promised her, we said it's a retirement home with seniors 60 and over that are independent, ambulatory, meaning walking, will not be needing any assistance, and we explained that to them. That was not sufficient. Renovation, we did not do any renovation in that property. It was purchased as is. What was done on that property, the reason why a lift is in that property is because in a retirement home, residents are subject to fall. If there's a knee replacement or a fall and they need the lift, if they're downstairs, that's what it is for. It's nothing else than that. RHRA will register a home in a municipality 5 and more. 5 persons and more. A type 1 group home, the city, when you call the city and they authorize you that you're okay to start a home, they will, you first have to get your license from a regulatory body, which you get that license, and then you come back to the city. So therefore, an application was sent to RHRA, which we are within a type 1 group home. Also, once the application was sent in for the group home through the council, Esther met with Councillor Fortini, Councillor Williams, and someone else, to which Councillor Fortini, they all agreed that it was okay and there was no issues. They had no concerns. They had prior to.
Okay, please.
And so, because I was taken aback when we were told that, he is totally against the home, and there is a meeting, because Morella normally have a meeting with the councillors to tell the councillors what is coming on, and he was made aware. So to tell the citizens that he was not aware is totally false. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we go on. Councillor Fortini, you're on the board.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify something. I did say it was okay if the residents were okay, and I was the one who pushed the letters to go out, 240 meters, me and Charmaine. I had no issue with the group home, but so long as the residents were okay. If the residents weren't okay, I was not going to support it. That's what I said in the meeting. And in the meeting, I also asked if she was living in there, and how many people. She said 5, and she will be living in there. That's what the meeting, that part of the meeting, well, it's not true. Well, there was other people. Anyway, I'm not going to argue with.
Okay, please, this is
stuff.
not a
So
again,
I
this
just
is
wanted
not a
to clarify,
dialogue to go
yeah.
back and forth. Right
So-
now, Councillor Fortini, you have the
So,
floor.
thank you, through the chair. So, Rick, I'm looking at the bylaws. I have to agree with my residents, so there's, I think even Charmaine. So we want to put a motion forward. Since a review bylaws are coming up, and we're going to look at how these group homes are being individual, and I think takes about another year. Until that comes forward, we want to put a hold on this group home until a new reviewing of the group policies and bylaws are being reported back. I'm hoping by the end of 2020. And Charmaine's going to second the motion. So that's what I'm requesting.
City Clerk, do you have a copy of the motion? Is there a motion?
I do not.
Okay, move by myself and second by Charmaine.
Okay. Councillor, while we have the City Clerk entertain the motion, Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I understand the passion that's in the room. Please understand that this is a walk-on. We deal with matters that are before us in our agendas like this all the time. So we have no information other than what you've came and explained to us here today, and in a passionate way, and we understand that and we get it. But we don't make decisions up here without a staff report in front of us. So I don't know where we are in the process. I don't recall this coming to members. I'm not sure where this sits as of today. I'm not prepared to make a decision on an item like this. I'll always support reviewing bylaws. I don't know how we can put a motion to review bylaws on the floor when we don't have an item before us, so we'll let the clerk, if he can explain that. But I'm happy to, maybe move or request the area councilors just move deferral of this item back to staff for a report to come forward so that we can actually have something before us and make an educated decision. Thank you very much.
Okay, do staff, before I hand it back to you, Councillor Fortini, Rick, do you want to say anything, or?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know that, in all honesty, that there is a proper course of action to put forward to stall the process. The city's role in this process is to comment to the province as to whether or not there is compliance with the zoning bylaw prior to registration of the group home. So, I mean, we have a bylaw that requires us to notify the public and keep a registration of those group homes that do open in Brampton. And through that bylaw is how the community is notified in the public meeting held. But it's not a typical application under the Planning Act where you have opportunity for comment and input and reporting back. It is simply a response to the province as to whether or not compliance with the zoning bylaw has been met. So I don't know if maybe it would be a good opportunity to to take 5 minutes to consult with legal services about any possible
Okay.
options.
So I suggest we call a recess. It's 9:10. I would suggest a 15-minute break to come back at 9:25 to allow for relevant parties to get legal advice. And I'll see everybody back. It's 9:10 or 9:09. Be back at 9:25. Okay, thank you. So I believe, so after staff, I'll pass it back over to you, Councillor Fortini. You're on the board.
Thank you, through the chair. So, thank you, everyone. So, okay, so we talked to legal. We still haven't have 100% what's going on, so we're gonna bring it back. I think it's what, 4 weeks from now? And get more reports on how the bylaw, on another public evening meeting.
Through you,
Am I
Mr.
correct?
Chair, it would be October the 7th.
October
7
7th?
o'clock
And
planning
you
committee
have enough
meeting.
time for that, or you wanna bring it to November?
We, I think we would, we better deal with this sooner than later.
So, okay, so November, so the legal's gonna work with the definition and everything and bring everything back.
So do we need a motion?
October 7th.
Or is that just directed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, then the motion is to defer this matter to the October 7th Planning and Development Committee meeting and have staff report back at that meeting. So a deferral motion is not debatable. Committee must take a vote immediately.
Okay, deferral motion's on the floor, moved by Councillor Fortini, second by Councillor Williams. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So for those who, please go on the board. Yes, Councillor Williams?
Thank you for acknowledging a point of clarification. Just for the residents in the room, can we just explain to them what the process is going to be and what they're going to be expecting on that October 7th?
So I'll hand this over to Rick, if you can just
Thank you.
walk through to the residents what will happen till October 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So between now and October 7th, we will be outlining in a report to Planning Committee what the steps are in the registration process for group home type 1, what our role is as the city in the provincial registration process, where this application is in that process. And we will report back October 7th with those details.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennard.
Oh, sorry, can I just?
Councillor Fortini.
And just to clarify, so that'll come with the permits they have for the sprinklers and all, everything will be in the report and everything? Or just this part?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can give a status update on the applications for building permits at that time as well.
Okay, well, we're looking at basement apartments and, exit, and they have bedrooms in the basement, they have no second exit to allow this. It's still considered like a basement apartment, really. So we have to put that, all this stuff in the report.
I can confirm that we've received an application for building permit for changing the use of that building.
Okay.
And we are at the technical review stage going through it with the applicant to resolve some of those issues. But we will provide an update at that October 7th meeting.
I just hoping through the chair, like by October 7th, you're okay, because I'd rather get it right and wait another 2 weeks. If it gives you time, if you're okay with it, I'm fine.
I am, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so can I get a motion to receive all the delegations? Would you like to speak? Please come forward.
Sorry, no. Through you, Mr. Chair, committee has deferred this matter, so the matter's been dealt with. Any of those persons that did delegate this evening, we have their information if they've signed up, and the clerk's office will notify them when this report comes back on October 7th. Anybody else that is interested in this, you can send an email to the city clerk's office at brampton.ca, and we will make sure you're notified.
Yeah. Or you can speak to your local councillors and provide the comments. Okay, so motion to receive delegations moved by Councillor Fortini. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We'll give it a couple minutes for anyone who wants to leave council chambers. Sorry? You lost the wallet? Excuse me, just attention, anyone. One of the members of the audience lost a wallet, so if you do find a wallet on the floor, oh, they did? Okay. Okay. Any further service, we're here to serve. Okay, at this time, I'd like to invite, we're at item 5.1, delegation from Mr. Peter Smith from Bousfield Incorporated, request for exemption from Section 22 of the Planning Act to facilitate making an application to amend Secondary Plan Area 6, Brampton Flowertown, and the zoning bylaw. Okay, I'll just, maybe just want to give one, sorry, my apologies. Sure. Can people, if you're no longer here in the audience, yeah, he wants to speak. He requested that. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of committee. My name is Peter Smith. I'm a land use planner and partner with Bousfields. We're retained by the numbered company, Smart Centers, with respect to the commercial plaza at Main and Vauden. We've reviewed the recommendation report. I know it's late. I will simply say that we support the analysis in the report and support the recommendation of staff, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, at this time, we'll bring forward item 7.1. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? No. Can I get a motion to receive the delegation and move staff report? Moved by Councillor Vicente. All in favor? Can I see those hands? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We go on to item 5.3, delegations regarding Queen Street West Tertiary Plan Ward 4. Councillor Bowman, is this after the delegations? No, Ward 4. Okay, Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. There is a closed session item, so I would like to ask to move into closed session, take care of the item before we come back and hear the delegations.
Okay, members of the committee, if we have a motion to move into closed session, all in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bowman, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. Before our delegates come to the floor to speak, I would like to move a deferral of this motion for 2 weeks to the next planning session.
Okay, we have a deferral on the floor.
It's on the screen.
A recorded vote's been requested by Councillor Paleshi.
Yeah, we can vote on the board.
Okay, vote on the board, Councillor Fay. I mean, City Clerk.
So recorded vote's been requested on the motion on the screen, which is a deferral. All those in favor, please press your buttons.
Not working?
All members have voted. And the deferral motion carries 10-0.
Okay, thank you. So we move on to our next item, which is item 5.4, delegation from Neil Davis regarding application to amend the official zoning bylaw to permit a motor vehicle sales, leasing, rental establishment, accessory motor vehicle repair, body shop, outside storage, and drive-through facilities. So we'll just give it a couple minutes. Yep. What's this? Who's this from? Okay, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to, is this on your screens, what I'm looking at?
Nothing's on.
Yeah. This is another item.
So my apologies, Mr. Chair. We're using another computer, not the one at the podium, to try and project. So if Mr. Davis does his delegation, he has to advance to the next slide, then we'll do it manually back.
So, again, committee, I was before you in April, and at that time I made a presentation requesting an in-principle support for the addition of one additional use to the property, being an automotive use. And the map shows you the parcel, two parcels, blocks 10 and 11, that were before you. I then showed you, and do I just push this next button, or?
You can push this one.
Thank you. And this slide was before you that showed 6 permissions that had been provided through minor variance with staff support in the area since the original auto mall concept was envisioned in the area in purple. And those 6 permissions for automotive use all around us changed the landscape, quite frankly, of what made sense for the parcel before you. And the committee voted, and council ultimately approved the in-principle support for the automotive use. So what's happened since that time is we submitted, as requested, the official plan amendment and rezoning application and a long list of studies. And I won't go into the detail, but the resolution had thought it would come back in July. It did not, because there was an argument about extent and scope of a certain study. In any event, we did get a comfort letter from Mr. Parsons indicating that you would have before you an opportunity tonight and on Wednesday to make a choice as to supporting your in-principle position or not. And I think part of the issue I have is that you don't have a bylaw in front of you provided by staff. So we put a bylaw, 2 bylaws before you for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw that we provided with the application in May. And we have asked for any comment from staff on that. So we are assuming those bylaws are fine because we've received no feedback that they are not. Staff have submitted a rather lengthy report indicating why they're concerned about your in-principle support turning into an actual support with a bylaw. And because it was so lengthy, and we don't have as long here as we would need to give a fulsome reply, I asked Mr. Gagnon's office to give a complete reply, which he did, and we've had delivered to all members of council, and was done in a way that had the issue of staff and a response. So I'm not going to go through all of that. It's Appendix 2 of what you've been provided, and it's available. What I do want to do is sort of talk through the main themes of concern in that report. And while I want to be respectful, I do think there's some factual errors in that report and some, I think, inconsistencies in approach in how they're dealing with the area. And I do want to, because it seems like we're bringing down all provincial policy ever written by adding a single commercial use to 13 permitted commercial uses, and we're not. And if we could show the, let me see, hopefully it's next. Nothing's happened. Okay, there's the proposal that I showed you in April. There. And in the report, there was an error, and I won't go through a number of them, but this is important. It indicates that under the rules that we are limited to, we are asking for 39,000 square meters of development. We are asking for a little over a quarter of that. Those are the facts. It's just completely wrong. The next thing that's said is that we are asking for 39 times greater retail permission than permitted. The zoning bylaw there has no limit. What's more important, we're not even defined as retail in your own zoning bylaw. There's a separate definition for automotive uses. So there may be in the OP some provision around retail uses. It doesn't apply to our use, and it was not carried forward into the zoning bylaw for the lands. Then there is an issue of loss of industrial land. So, and it's put there, the vacancy factor is low, and we need to protect development-ready industrial land. So, in the 6 applications, through minor variance, in those 6 applications, not once was the issue of losing industrial land supply mentioned. So all those, that issue is not of concern. But more relevant is we're not even zoned for industrial uses. If you look at 2259, there is no permission for industrial use. That is, the entire zoning on our property is listed there in terms of permitted uses. Yet the staff supported, above that, uses that were permitting industrial use. So let me then go to, and there was some time, considerable time spent on nonconformity with provincial and regional plans and policies. And let me say that nonconformity with provincial plans was not raised, and I provided, I'm not going to take you through it, but I did provide a report, and all 6 reports were the same. There was no issue raised in those 6 reports about nonconformity with provincial planning policy. What was mentioned was that you have to show you have enough jobs being created out of the use you're going to put on the property. So staff asked for an employment analysis as to how many jobs are created out of automotive use, and the answer was, the analysis demonstrates that the proposed automotive dealership can provide more jobs than if the lands were developed for prestige industrial uses. The proposal provides an appropriate contribution to the employment capacity targets and does not detract from achieving the required employment yield. The proposal meets the intent of the official plan. So no issue about regional plans, provincial plans. It says it's meeting your plan. And there was consistent reasoning in all 6 reports. What is surprising to me is that concern was not expressed in those reports, even though if you look under 2262, which is immediately above us and is supported for 2 automotive uses, it does allow for industrial use. Ours does not. So how in heaven's name can you say, I'm not concerned about the lands that are designated industrial, but I'm concerned about you that are designated service commercial? Same issue on conversion. Through the report, it says you are converting, we have to wait for some kind of study. Again, practically wrong. There's no conversion. We are zoning service commercial to add 1 use. That's what we're doing. Unlike in the others, where they were taking employment lands with industry permissions and using them for other than, and your staff said it was okay. And then they talk in the report about market. And let me say again, in the 6 reports, market was never asked to be studied by any of them. But more relevant here is we weren't asked. When we sat down and went through the requirements for support for the official plan amendment and zoning, there was no request for a market study. In addition, we met in July to get the comfort letter saying it's coming back in September, keep the automotive dealers interested. When we got that, no mention of market study being required. So market studies being raised after, and I made this presentation in April, after an owner who has 39 dealerships across this country has said, I want to invest $50 million in this piece of property, knows the business, and says, I want to land it here. And there's a questioning about whether or not he's making a good investment. That's his choice. And if he's wrong, all that happens is you've got 13 uses that in 7 years have not been picked up for any of the permissions that are there, including a funeral home. Have not been picked up for those uses, so we're in no worse position. I think they should want us to be successful, quite frankly, and attract $50 million worth of investment to this piece of property. In conclusion, I would say, and there was one other suggestion, I got to deal with it. They said, well, others haven't built yet. Well, they're not ready to build yet. I talked to one because I've dealt with them for 25 or 30 years, and that's Colony. They own the property immediately abutting us. And I spoke to Dave Kerr in April, and he said, absolutely, we are relocating to these premises. It takes time. So there should be no questioning of people wanting to do this. This is going to be a very successful auto mall, and we want to be a part of it. So in conclusion, I would respectfully submit that your in-principle support was soundly founded in selecting a vision to add the additional automotive use to allow for the opportunity to see up to $50 million of new construction man-hours, create several hundred permanent full-time jobs, to meet a market demand, if not met here, is going someplace else, including to another community, not this city, and is a logical extension to all of the permissions that this city has supported all around us. I would ask that you confirm your in-principle choice. You have before you the bylaws for both the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw that we provided in May, and no one has said they aren't in correct form. And I would ask you recommend to council that those bylaws be passed.
Okay, thank you. We have members of the committee on the board. Councillor DeLong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I think almost getting tired of talking about the benefits of a dealership here. There's a number of reasons why this is beneficial. It brings jobs, it's good investment, it makes sense. The surrounding area, I think it's 6 plots of land have been given permission by the committee. I believe staff has supported those ones as well. The rationale that that staff has given and that we need, these commercial retail outlets there, I don't think makes sense. If you take a look at Inspire Boulevard, I believe it's a design flaw. These shops should have been in the center of that area. I think if we have retail there, it'll take away from their already fledgling business. And so we want to support them. We don't want to harm them even more. If you take a look at the south on Countryside and Dixie Road, there's land there where there's ample supply of options that residents could have once retail can come there. We have Trinity Common to the south. We have to the east, we have the Fresco Plaza where residents can go to. So I'm not even sure who'd be interested. There's nobody that's been interested up to this point. And so we've belabored the point, this conversation for too long. I'm not sure why this has come back. Council had directed, had approved this in principle, and so I do have a motion that outlines everything. I won't go through all the whereases, but essentially what it does, it says for number 1, the delegation of Neil Davis be received, and number 2, Planning and Development Committee hereby recommend that council adopt the official plan amendment and implementing zoning bylaw amendment attached hereto at its meeting of September 11, 2019. And if there's any issues in this bylaw draft, that staff come back to council before the next date. Thank you.
So while we folks read it, consider it, I'll have Councillor Palaszczuk on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So these are the 9th, the 11th, on Wednesday. These minutes go to council on Wednesday?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, the recommendations from Planning Committee and, if necessary, any implementing bylaws.
Okay. Neil, I've actually talked to a number of people, and there are some really good jobs coming out of dealerships where people are really happy with their, with their day-to-day lives. And if you're mechanics, you're salesmen, managers, and then there's good part-time jobs as well that are in there. And I know that, at the city, we always looked at jobs in a different way because of the previous government and the way they classified jobs. And from my understanding, the new government is classifying jobs a little bit differently. And they're kind of saying a job's a job is a job. We've never looked at it that way, and we should maybe re-look at or start rethinking what we classify as jobs. But I've said to you before, I've seen this application before, it's now 4 times, I think, and I say it every time. And if the owners are here, I'll say it to them again. I challenge them to do something special here. I agree with 100% in what you want to do, but I challenge you to do something special, because I don't want to see a sea of cars and parking lots and parking lots. I can't say that I love the conceptual drawing that's before us. I think there's a lot of opportunity in this location. You got Dixie Road, you got 410, you got Mayfield that's expanding to 6 lanes as we speak. This is going to be a great location, and if one day, if there's, change in the need to have these dealerships here, this is the easiest thing to redevelop 20 years, 25, 50 years from now, or whatever the case may be. Happy to support Councillor Dillon's motion, but again, people have to start thinking outside of the box when they're putting things like this in fantastic areas like this.
I agree.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Palaszczuk. So we have a motion on the floor, members of committee, moved by Councillor Diallo. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item of business, item 5.5, delegation from Kurt Franklin.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much. My name is Kurt Franklin. I'm a planner with Weston Consulting, here on behalf of Hobel Developments and the owner of the site located at 10524 Huron, Ontario Street. We submitted the request to City Planning for the permission to submit an official plan amendment to modify the secondary plan to relocate a road. We've reviewed the staff report and are in support of their recommendation, and I'm glad to go into more detail if you require it. Otherwise, I will leave it in your hands.
Okay, thank you very much. Then, can I get a motion? Are there any questions or comments, Councillor Palaszczuk on the board?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and glad to see that this property is coming to light. I'm happy to move the report. I do ask staff to take in to advisement Y-Bank. There's a major parking issue that we're having in this area as of right now, with new businesses going in and them not having the capacity. So I'm looking for opportunity when we do take a portion of Y-Bank, we maybe look at potentially increasing road parking either by permit or putting the machine paid parking systems there. And I just ask you to take that into advisement when this comes back.
Okay,
I'm
thank
happy
you.
to move the report. Thanks.
Okay, so Councillor Palaszczuk has moved receipt of the delegation and the report. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, members of committee, we have now, I believe, we're using consent.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I believe all we have left is under correspondence. There's 13.2, correspondence regarding item 4.5 for receipt, and correspondence 13.3 regarding item 4.1 for receipt.
Okay, so can I get a motion to receive the correspondence moved by Councillor Vicente? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So we are now on Councillor question period. Are there any questions by members of committee? No? Okay. Now we are on to public question period. Anybody in the public? 1, 2, 3. No. And now I ask for our next meeting is September 23rd at 1 p.m. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Councillor Santos, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.